everyone. What an honor it is to be with you once again here. I'm Georgia Calvin-Smith, and welcome to the Africa CEO Forum's Fair Climate Transition webinar series. We're going to be looking at how African economies can lead the way towards a more sustainable, equitable energy future. Now, that encompasses a whole range of sectors and issues, and today's episode will be tackling one of the most powerful and complex tools at Africa's disposal: local content policies, well, as we call them, LCPs. Now, these are more than just rules. They are levers for economic inclusion, industrial development, and long-term resilience. But are LCPs delivering on their promise? Are they attracting or putting off capital? And what happens when infrastructure gaps prevent their full implementation? So we're going to be breaking all of this down today with an amazing panel. So thank you all so much for making the time to join us today to share your expertise. I'm lucky enough to have in studio with me Ambassador Doreen Ruth Amuli, the Ambassador to France from the Republic of Uganda. Ambassador, thank you so much for coming on set and helping us break down all the tricky ins and outs of this topic that we're going to be looking at today.
Thank you so much. It is a pleasure to be here and to be talking about a very important question of the world today.
Thank you so much. We're really looking forward to hearing what you have to say. Also with us, we have Sheikh Omar Diallo from Total Energies. Sheikh, thanks so much for coming and giving us the perspective from the private sector.
And thank you to you too, Calvin, and thank you to all. As it has just been said, it is really a crucial subject, and I am very pleased and honored to be invited to talk about it.
We're looking forward to hearing what you have to say. Also with us is Nafi Chinnery, the Africa Director from the Natural Resource Governance Institute. She's going to be really breaking things down for us from the perspective of civil society. Nafi, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And can you hear me? Is everything okay there? Okay, thank you very much for having me, and hello to my fellow panelists. I really look forward to contributing and also learning from all of you in the studio.
And finally, with us is Jules Nyankam, the Group CEO of African Guarantee Funds. He's really going to be looking at things from the perspective of finance and risk. Jules, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to join this webinar to share some insight in the industry on the related topic that we are discussing today. Thank you.
Okay, so let's get stuck in. So, Ambassador, I'm going to start off with you. So set the scene for us. How would you describe the current political will across the continent when it comes to LCPs?
Yeah, to start with, first of all, for a very long time, Africa has been referred to as a dark continent. And in my own perspective, I think it is because of the lightning and electrification that is minimal in Africa that makes people think when you fly over, that's my saying, though may not be documented, that you don't see a lot of lights, you don't see a lot of electricity. So this in itself, first of all, is a trigger, because no one would want to be referred to in a kind of a manner that does not please you. And for me, that is also an energy triggering point that Africans had to look at. But to say this is the urge for maximizing development for the African continent is one of the triggers that has made African countries to ask themselves, when they refer to energy, how much more would they achieve in all dimensions of growth and development? Because when you look at development and you talk about energy, you'll find that in one way or another, energy interlinks development from one point to another. Let's talk about infrastructure. You'll need energy for you to achieve that. And in energy development, let's say explorations. When you explore energy, you'll be supplying electricity to the people, you'll be supplying electricity for industrial development, and also the proceeds of energy will be reinvested into the sectors of development. So a mixture and the large for economic growth and development is one of the reasons as to why Africans had to look into local content. And when we bring in local content, what are we trying to talk about? We are trying to say, can our African people respond to the question of energy development, of supplying of labor? Can they compete in the supply chain of the world? So in all of this, we are looking at energy, giving local content, and of course, this has to be embedded into the policies of each and every country, so that when we have expertise who can come and help Africa come out from the notion of being dark without energy, without sufficient electricity, or without sufficient source of power, can they come and work together with the local people? In what terms? Are the African people able to supply the human resource needed to explore the resources, and also to expand the electricity that we probably needed, or the energy? So these are kind of a push or a drive that the political will, that drives the political will across Africa. And the pressure from the population. People want jobs. People need supplies. People want to live good. People don't want to be going to get treatment abroad. So in that, we are saying, as we look at energy, what can we achieve in terms of resources, in terms of development, in terms of mixture of whatever need that people within specific countries would be yearning for. And also a mix in encouraging policies that are aimed at sustainable development. All this has to be inclusive. So these are some of the drives that I look at as one thing that is now making each and every African country to come up to look at energy sector, but not as an isolated case. Because energy in itself is not enough to call it a developed country. But energy should be in position to be triggered down up to the local people, those who cannot afford to go elsewhere. Energy should be in position to provide jobs. Energy should help us to be in position even to create, for instance, relationship with neighboring countries.
So I understand. So basically what you're saying is that to make the most of successes and progress in electrifying the continent, you have to include LCP to make sure that the population is prepared to kind of push all those opportunities in terms of development that come with progress in electrification.
Definitely, right. Yes, because every African countries are asking themselves, if we want to develop our energy sector, definitely they may not have enough expatriates to invest in this. But the experts who are coming from outside to help us build this development structure, energy, roads, and so on that we need. How about on our side? Where do we leave our people? That's why LPC answers a question. For example, in Uganda, when you employ in an energy sector one expert, then you must employ 3 other Ugandans to complement. This is to also answer the question of knowledge transfer and training, which is skill development. So at the end of the day, you find that energy in itself is not the solution that African countries are looking for only, but we are looking at a broader perspective of inclusive and progressive and long-term development policies, and also infrastructure development that is anchored together within the energy, but also touching all other parts of life, including social benefits.
Ambassador, you have so well set the scene and taking us through so many of the crucial aspects of why LCP is complex but essential. I'm actually so let's get the perspective from the private sector. Sheikh Omar, you're at Total Energies. How do you think that local content policies have evolved over the last decade or so? And where do you see the greatest strides?
Yeah, thank you for this question. What you can say is that there is a significant evolution. It has been said by the ambassador. At the beginning, the local content policies were based on 2 pillars. It was mostly about local employment and buying local goods. But it was no more than that. Now, with the maturity of the government in the energy sector, but as well as in the mining sector, with the pressure for the civil society, with different factors, now we do have broader policies which encompass different areas. And it is obviously about creating jobs and consuming local goods, but it is now more than that. It is about technology transfer. It is creating value in the country, value chains in the country. So we do have now a larger perimeter for the local content policies. We do have more organized states, more organized government in this. That is to say, they do have the policies, but they have also put in place an organization to be sure that these policies are implemented. We do have this kind of example in Angola. We do have also in Nigeria also this kind of example with dedicated entities to monitor and to be sure that local content policies are implemented. The ambassador has just talked about the Ugandan case. It is also the case in Uganda. So for now, we do have border policies. The government wants to create more value in the country, to develop the local tissue, to develop the local industries. And it is not anymore just about creating jobs, and it is not and buying goods locally. For the company, we do support fully this. We are, if we just take the case of Uganda, we are really involved in this in the local content policy designed by the government. But at the end of the day, and I think that we talk about that, there are some difficulties. We are facing some difficulties in that, and it is a reality in Africa. It is, for example, about having more skilled people. We have just talked about expatriates. But sometimes we do face difficulties to fill in the position, the empty position. It is about also for our businesses, maybe to have more, businesses with stronger financial capacity or with more expertise. But I think that we talk about that in the debate.
Jules, I'm going to come to you. So we've heard both the ambassador and Sheikh Omar talking about the importance of skilling up local communities, but also, you know, some of the difficulties in slotting them into maybe potential either requirements or opportunities that come under LCP. But, you know, in parallel to that, what's your take from the financial and the risk side on local suppliers' ability to meet the financial and operational thresholds required to win the kind of contracts that would be coming from international companies? Do you think the risks are still too high for most funders to get comfortable with that?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so when we talk about the local content, I believe that is very critical, the local content, mainly when we talk about the climate transition. But something to keep in mind is that the risk remains very high. And I will approach maybe that challenge around the risk at two levels, you know, at the macro level and at the micro level. So at the macro level, one of the major risks that we are facing in the continent is the currency risk. You know, we've seen the depreciation of most African currency over the past 3 years. You take the example of Naira that went from $1 for 400 Naira to $1 for, I think, 1,600. This is 4 times. You take, that was the same story for the Ghanaian CD, you know, from 5 CD to $1 to 15 at the peak. 3 times same thing in North Africa with the Egyptian pound. Yeah, that went from 15 up to 45. So the risk is there, and that is the currency risk. Even now, when you go on the side of the credit risk, over the last few years, 8 African countries have been downgraded, you know, by the major credit rating, Standard & Poor's, Fitch, and Moody's, and this create a lot of pressure on the borrowing cost of those African countries, and that will also translate on the capacity or the ability of the businesses to be able to borrow at a good level, you take the market risk, which is also very high. More than 80% of the African countries depend on commodity export, and that makes them very vulnerable to the fluctuation of the commodity prices. So this is at the macro level. At the micro level, when we come down now to the private sector, to the SMEs, they constitute 90% of the private sector. The risk is even higher, mainly when we talk about the company involved in the climate transition, in the green economy. And that for many reasons. I think one of the reasons will be like the liquidity gap. Green projects tend to have a higher upfront cost. And the financial institution, they tend to select the companies that need a lower initial disbursement, which is like the choice between the OPEX and the CAPEX. Higher OPEX, lower CAPEX, and vice versa. And that creates this kind of liquidity gap where the bank, they will tend to prefer those projects that have a lower upfront cost. The duration gap is also one of the challenges. The payback period is quite long. It's longer for the green project. We know over time we make benefit, in terms of energy saving, but the payback period can be quite long. And that mismatch between the resources of the banks and the duration of the green project is also a challenge. We have the collateral gap, mainly also for the green project. When they assess those projects, they look at the resale value of the equipment. And when you look at the secondary market in Africa for the equipment or for the green equipment, it's still not really kind of developed, because of the maintenance issue. We don't have like all the expertise, to make sure that we can maintain those green equipment. And the currency mismatch is a big one. It's a big one because most of the time, those companies, they purchase those equipment in hard currency, but their revenue is in local currency. How do you manage those type of risk, to be able now to take the full advantage of the LCPs? But the risk is really a challenge, and that remains high. Thank you
so much for that breakdown, Jules. And Nafi, what's your take? Do you think that we've heard some of the excuse me, we've heard about some of the logistical and kind of administrative and skills hurdles when it comes to slotting in local suppliers into the opportunities created under LCP. But do you think that the frameworks themselves are designed well enough to serve the broader public interest? Do you think they're generally creating opportunities for the communities they're meant to support?
Okay, thank you very much. So from a governance perspective, the intent behind Africa's local content policies
Oh, we seem to have lost Nafi. Our team is going to be working as hard as possible to get her back because we really want to hear the end of her take on that. But whilst we work on that behind the scenes, let's open it up. Ambassador, so, there's so many different aspects to this. We've got the communities, we've got the governance, we've got civil society, we've got the private sector. How do governments manage that very difficult balance of designing LCPs that deliver on their priorities, but that don't put off investors or energy companies with, for example, too much bureaucracy or unrealistic regulations and expectations?
Yes. One question that every government has to ask itself is, how do we look at investors? Most times, even at an individual level, you may think investors are all about profit making. But these investors come with their resources, come with their money to put in the country, whether it is for exploration, whether it is for infrastructure development, and all sorts of development sector. So these investors, first of all, has to be viewed as partners in development, as stakeholders in the country. So one very important thing is the government has to put clear and flexible local content measures. and policies that are easily interpreted by investors and appreciated. So in this way, they will be benefiting the investors by not taking a lot of time in trying to understand and interpret what would be, because what investors fear most is the legality effects of something that goes wrong at the end of the day when they have already committed. So what they would want to know is the policies regarding local content has to be as simplified, flexible, clear, and achievable within the time frame of the projects. That's one thing that critically government has to look into. Then also involvement. Before signing of the contracts or handing over of everything that government has to do, they have to involve. Maybe even they should do research before, so that sectors get to appreciate what each country has in mind as far as local content is concerned. Because at the end of the day, for example, if our local content says, out of every one expatriate, you employ 2 others, and you've not put in a clause in the circumstance that the investors can't find such expatriates locally within the country, what happens? So all that has to be spelled out so that you don't waste a lot of time, you don't lose the investors, you don't kill the morals of the investors, you don't make it hard for them to come in. And then government has also to simplify the compliance processes. Where there is a bit of a sluggish compliance, what happens? What would be, and I don't think penalties should always be the measures. In fact, penalties should come in the worst case scenario, but shouldn't be looked at as a target. And local content policies and designs shouldn't be looked at as a barrier. It should be a facilitator to develop the local people, and government should also invest in the training of the local people geared towards different sectors, especially energy sectors in this case, that by the time we are trying to implement these policies, actually we have the right human resources in place, we have the right capital in place, we should give incentives, we should also give waivers. We should, actually what I would think is government should motivate investors in such a way that if they're given maybe tax holidays, tax incentives in exchange for transfer of knowledge and maybe skill development, it would first of all boost the number of skilled laborers. These will be employable people, especially in the young population of Africa. And in that case, it should be clear. When we develop so many skilled laborers locally, what do we get as a company? Because these are expensive. Some of them have to fly these young people out of the country to go and develop them and also maintain them. So all of this has to be embedded into the policies and made very crystal clear to everyone so that it is a partnership. Then the local people and the companies themselves should also appreciate the fact that they are coming to work together as partners, as stakeholders. Then they should win the trust of the local people. How are they going to win the trust of the local people? Sometimes some of the projects, for example, the Tilenga, I'm happy that, that the representative of Coke Total is here. Sometimes some of these energy projects disorganizes people's way of life, their settlement, where they have been. So how are you going to speak to these people that this project is not only to come and make money for the investors, but it's going to benefit you and your children's children? So it should be a win-win scenario that government has to factor in their policies to make it very easy for the investors not to lose hope, but rather feel welcomed and ready to partner with government in the comprehensive development. And this
before I think this is a great time to move on to Sheikh Omar. But before I do that,
yes,
besides looking perhaps the way that they communicate and interact with the communities within which they're operating, anything else that you think that energy operators, energy companies should do in that? I mean, we did start this question with it's a partnership, it's a two-part process. Anything else that you think that they should be bearing front of mind when they come onto the continent and start, operating, but also, paying attention to the LCP kind of landscape under which they'll be working?
Yes, this is like a two-way traffic. It's a give and take scenario, psychologically, financially, and with the commitments. So once investors want to sail through in every country that they want to work in, first of all, they should show commitment to the government, to the local people, and to the partners. Because if they're going to say, buy local products in order for them to succeed, and also if they're going to say, recruit more of the local people. So first of all, they should be interested in investing in the same people. If their skills are not as good as they want, how do they implement that? That's why government, if they give them incentives in terms of tax and so on, then they should also be ready to train the people. So that is already sending out a message of commitment to the government and to the local people. Also invest in the training of the local people. This is all what the investors should do. And when they hire the local talents, this is also another way that they build a relationship, not only with government, but with also the local people. And we are now seeing the benefits of the energy sector triggering into employability of the people, creating jobs, which jobs will trigger down into social benefits of someone having cash money to be able to facilitate his family and also pay taxes to the government. So it is an all-round development. And also earning trust of the community is very paramount, because some of these energy projects pass through people's land, through people's home, through people's institutions. So all of this is important for them to come prepared to build all this kind of relationship. And then sourcing resources locally. When you get resources from the local people, sometimes it may not be as good as you may wish, but you can over time improve the quality and the quantity as you may want. So these are some of the things I feel that the investors should come prepared to assimilate themselves into the policies of government.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Bear that in mind, a very precise list of things to consider when coming to operate on the continent. Sheikh Omar, I did promise to bring you in, but thankfully we managed to have Nafi, to get Nafi back on the line. So I would ask you to bear with me, because we're really keen to get her take on this whole landscape. Nafi, so I'm just going to roll two in one. Based on some of the considerations that the ambassadors just set out in terms of what communities need from operators who are amongst their midst, what's your take on how LCPs serve the broader public interest, and the role that organizations like yourself and civil society play in general to make sure that all sides involved deliver on the commitments that they make?
And apologies for...
No. Open your mic. I think. Oh, we've got you. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. We just heard you.
I don't know, for some strange reasons, today it's just...
Oh, it's technology is teasing us. Okay, so I'm going to ask Nafi if you can see if you can get some assistance to try and regulate the whatever tech gremlin is haunting us today, because the wait is only making your contribution probably better, definitely anticipated. And as we hope, as you sort that out, we're going to cross over to Sheikh Omar. So some pretty clear expectations, hopes, aspirations set out by the ambassador. But on your side, what's your response to some of the things that she raised, and what kind of regulatory clarity or flexibility do companies like Total Energies need from governments to be able to plan under the context of LCP for the long term?
Okay, thank you. As a company, we are really aware that local content policies are key for one country development. This is a fact, and it is not about discussing that. But when we are talking about implementing local content policies, I think that we do have somewhere a dilemma. Dilemma first about the term. That is to say, are we talking about the short term, middle, or long term? I will give some example. And even on the meaning of some words, flexibility. When we are talking about flexibility, what this word means in terms of terms of practicability. Talking about the short term and long term, when there is a definition of the local content policies, for example, for the human resources aspect, okay, we do expect from the international companies, the energy companies, maybe to hire a lot of people to fill in a senior executive position within the company in the country. The issue we face is that in the short term, we may not have all the resources. For example, if I take for the resources linked to engineers, to all the technological functions, we may have some discrepancies, we may have some gaps. So how to manage this? It's in the short term, it cannot be met. It is possible to meet this objective in the middle or the long term. When we are talking about local businesses, dealing with them in the short term in some areas could be really difficult. When I'm talking about, for example, if you want to launch a drilling campaign, having a company locally which has all the equipment necessary to your drilling campaign is really challenging. So in the short term, it is really not possible. So we have this kind of duality when we are talking about the term, when we are talking about the time to take to implement these local content policies. This is the reason why, for me, what is important when we are talking about local content policies, it is firstly to talk about this policy, but also to talk about the time it will take. We need to be aware that for any country, it will take time to put in place local policies, to have a lot of skilled people, to have a lot of industries, and so on. This is first. When we come to flexibility, for sure, we do request for flexibility when we cannot fulfill with the local content policies, but because of factual reason. But for the government, maybe this flexibility maybe could be sometimes really difficult. Okay, to say, okay, you cannot comply with this. Okay, you will not have any fine for not complying with this, because for the government, they do also some targets to meet. There is a pressure from the civil society, there is a pressure from the local businessman, and so on. So we do have this kind of dilemma regarding short-term, long-term. We do have this kind of dilemma regarding the meaning of flexibility. And at the end of the day, there are also some other difficulties in our countries. That is to say, there is a lack of infrastructure. We need, if we want to design some materials or we want to build some equipment locally, it is impossible. So we have to import this equipment from outside. And this means that sometimes we can be in opposite to the local content policy. And it has also been said by the ambassadors regarding the regulatory framework. I think that the key word is stability of the regulations. Why? Because when you do invest, you invest in a 20-25 years term. So your assumption and hypothesis are based on this term. So if you do invest today and 3 years after you do have a huge change in the policy, could be taxes, could be local content policies, so you may endanger your investment. So we need also to have stability regarding the regulation. So what I would say in response maybe to what the ambassador said, I'm fully in line with the ambassador. What she said, that we must all together build skills by training and so on. So we are fully in line. But in our country, we need to have a robust legal framework. We need to give time to build this really what we want to build, skilled people, to have a bigger company and so on. We need a strong legal framework. We need stability. We need also, at the end of the day, I think that it is what I can say. It is a call for patience, if you want to. But we are all aware that we need this. It is not possible for a foreign company to come to hire just expatriate, to have expatriate in the company to buy foreign goods. It is not any more possible. So we are all aware about that. But now, in the daily basis, how to implement this, how to fulfill with all this regulation and obligation. So in the daily basis, we need flexibility, but at the end of the day, there is a dilemma regarding the meaning of flexibility.
Thank you so much, Sheikh Omar. So it's a big continent, 54 countries. When financing is contingent on performance, I'm going to go to Jules to look at how what's your take on how de-risking mechanisms can be better structured to account for some pretty fragmented and constantly changing regulatory environments across the continent's markets. What's your experience in designing financial tools that kind of work in that kind of context?
Yes, thank you. You just put the finger on the real issue. I do believe that our biggest issue in Africa is fragmentation. We are so fragmented. And then as we are discussing about the issue around the LCPs, I think even those LCPs will suffer from that fragmentation. When we talk about the climate transition, right, it's about air pollution, water pollution, and that water pollution or air pollution will not limit itself within the boundary of a specific countries, right? And when you look at the African context in terms of fragmentation, imagine we have a continent with more than 40 currencies, more than 40. We have so many regulatory framework, many accounting standards. Just take the issue around the visa. If an African citizen wants to travel all around the continent, on average, that person will need 32 visas to travel all around the continent. The country that has the best visa condition today will need 45 visas, and the country that has the worst visa condition will need 45 visas, and the one with the best visa condition, 22 visas. This is a lot. And sometimes we need to put that also into perspective, right? You take our GDP in Africa. Our GDP is $3 trillion. We have more than 40 currency. You take the US, their GDP is close to $30 trillion, so 10 times bigger than our GDP. They have only one currency. No need for a visa to go from one state to another state. You take the case of the Eurozone, right? They have a GDP of $16 trillion, 5 times bigger than the GDP of the African continent. One currency, no kind of constraint on the visa. So fragmentation definitely is a real challenge. And then how do we overcome that? What we've been trying to do at ADF was to mainly deal with the banking group. When we see what is happening today in the capital market, in the financial market, the risking is becoming more and more critical. So I would say mainly in 3 areas. At the capital level, mainly in the context of the climate transition. You take, for example, the issuance of the green bond. Today we have more and more investors that are looking to invest in new asset classes, that are aligned to the green transition. So these investors are not just willing to make financial return, but they are happy to take a small cut that can be compensated by the climate return and also the social return. And when you look how the green bond market has evolved over the past 10 years, in 2024, the total volume of green bond issued worldwide was $15 billion. In 2022, it was $600 billion. And the analysts are anticipating that by 2050, we'll have 100 trillion of green capital flowing in the world economy. When you see the portion that goes to Africa is very small, it's less than 3%. And this is where we really need to adjust, our regulation our legal environment to be able to attract this type of investors. And this is where the risking also can be very critical. What we've been trying to do was to understand really what was the type of risk that those investors want to mitigate. And we have been able to design products that are adapt to this type of risk. But a big component will be on the regulatory end, right? Because, you know, when you see what is happening today in Western country, more and more of the central bank, the regulator, that they are discussing about finding a way to ease capital requirement for green lending. So every time a bank will lend to a green project, they get some capital relief. This is also something that we can think about. You know, that will incentivize the bank, you know, to mobilize more funding towards climate transition, because business opportunity are definitely there in all sectors. In transportation, we have a lot of companies today that are involved in the electrical vehicle, you know, the manufacturer, the assembler, the provider of batteries, the maintenance, the repairs, the recycling. When you look at the energy sector as well, the opportunity are just huge. Just to give you another statistic, you know, Africa represents only 3% of the global energy consumption in the world, only 3%. And our population is 18% of the world population. We consume only 3% of the energy in the world, and less than 5% of our energy potential has been exploited. So in terms of opportunity is definitely huge, but how do we understand the type of risks that are inherent to our business, mainly to the business climate, to our currency challenges, to the credit challenges, so that we can provide some solution to those investors. And this is what at AGF we are trying to achieve.
Thank you so much, Jules. Nafi, we're going to try again. We've got you back with us. So we've had a look at some of the, you know, heard there from Jules, the wider context within which investors and operators affected by LCPs operate when it comes to the kind of risks that they're taking into account when they're looking at planning and moving into a territory. But in terms of the community level, do you think that LCPs are doing what they're supposed to do in terms of supporting communities in their development journey, providing more opportunities? And how does civil society work to hold all the players to account?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Okay, just respond so I know. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. It's great to have you back with us, Nafi.
Okay. So I think that I'm going to go back to your question on the role of civil society before I respond to the last question, because I think it's important that we establish some points. So civil society has a crucial role to play, not just as, you know, oversight actors, but as facilitators of dialogue, providers of evidence, and enablers of community participation. And at NRGI, we believe that transparency and civic participation are essential pillars of accountable governance. So we've supported efforts in various countries across Africa, like Ghana, Nigeria, Uganda, Tanzania, and Senegal, to build civil society's technical capacity to engage on local content, scrutinize procurement data, advocate for inclusive policies. In Ghana, for example, through the platforms like the Public Interest and Accountability Committee, the Ghana EITI, civil society actively monitor petroleum revenue usage and local content targets, publishing regular reports that inform public debates and parliamentary oversight. And there are several ways that we can use to improve civil society role. And at NRG, I will continue to advocate for a number of things. So one, I think it's important to state monitoring and data disclosure. Data transparency is key. And government should publish local content reports, procurement registers, and employment statistics. Civil society organizations can help track company compliance with local content targets. And again, in Ghana, for example, with the Public Interest and Accountability Committee, it provides independent oversight of petroleum revenues. and have called attention to local content gaps in petroleum contracting. Similar bodies supported by CSOs could be developed for mining. And there are also examples from Sierra Leone. Second, I think it's important to state the capacity building for communities and local businesses. CSOs can also play a facilitative role by helping local SMEs understand procurement processes and build capacities to bid for contracts. This is happening across the continent. In some cases, for example, there is an example of an organization in Sierra Leone, a civil society organization in Sierra Leone that have trained community monitors to track employment and procurement at mine sites. But civil society actors need sustained support. And I think I heard one of the panelists mentioned that. Sustained support to analyze contracts, budgets, and performance data. This requires investment, not just from donors, but also from national governments committed to transparency. So NRGI has actively, that's the organization I work for, contributed to analyzing and interpreting intricate extractive sector data while training civil society organizations to understand and utilize this information in their oversight efforts. And the third one I would like to talk about is also about participatory policy processes. And there are examples across, like in Uganda, Ghana, Tanzania, where civil society organizations have engaged in drafting the local content bill and helped shape more balanced and feasible provisions. And NRG and our partners across contributed by providing comparative analysis and convening dialogues between government, industry, and citizens. And again, I had one of the points, and I think Ambassador Ruth mentioned that, the need for dialogue between all parties. And lastly, and I think the use of extractive industry transparency and initiative data is key. So we have supported the formation and strengthening of EITI stakeholder monitoring platforms, across the continent to leverage EITI data in different countries. For example, in DRC, Tanzania, Ghana, Uganda, where civil society actors, and local businesses and government officials jointly review performance reports to highlight compliance gaps and advocate for better performance. These platforms have helped reduce friction and created a shared understanding through, although they must be shielded from, political manipulation. Sometimes you have that. And so for me, I think that to scale this kind of accountability, governments must make local content plans and performance data public by default, ensure a safe civic space, and demonstrate their willingness to engage. And donors must also invest in the institutional and analytical capacity of civil society and affected communities. There is need for investment in regional peer learning and platform, perhaps similar to what we are doing today, but more of that, where civil society, government, and companies can share what works and what doesn't, because there is no one-size-fits-all model. Civil society can be a bridge between policy intent and people's lived realities, provided they are meaningfully included, equipped, and empowered. So that's, for me, I think, the role civil society can play and the support that is required to get civil society play a role in compliance with local content policies across the continent. On the issue of on the issue of balancing strike investment, the gap between the policy and the execution across Africa. I think that the gap between the policy and the actual execution is indeed one of the most pressing issue with local content in Africa. And then it's from a combination of factors. One is the institutional capacity deficit. Many governments have well-intentioned policies, as I would have loved to say in the first question, but it's all right. I think that other colleagues have mentioned. So there are well-intentioned policies, but the challenge is the lack technical and institutional capacity. That's the tool, the data, or skilled personnel to enforce them. So, for example, in Mozambique gas sector, significant local content obligations were written in the contracts, but enforcement agencies lack the tools, staffing data systems to monitor compliance effectively. Similarly, in Tanzania, the local content regulations in the mining sector are robust, but weak institutional oversight has led to inconsistent enforcement. And two is poor interagency coordination across the continent and in different countries. Ministries of mines, trade, labor, local governments often operate in silos, even with the immigration. They operate in silos. This fragmentation hinders effort to align local content with national development plans. And I think,
Nafi?
again, Ambassador highlighted that. In Zambia, for
Nafi,
example, mining sector procurement
Nafi,
is very
unfortunately, we're running out of time, and I really want to be able to tie together all of the threads that have been brought up by all of the speakers. But thank you so much. I'm so glad that we managed to get you on the line. So, you know, you're setting out some of the need for more sustained support for civil society in terms of being able to offer support to communities to participate in procurement processes. From all of the speakers, what we've heard is just how important better collaboration, communication, bridging is. We've got a few questions from the audience before we wrap up the session. And Jules, I'm just going to wrap you back in here. When it comes to bridging and bringing everybody in, one of the huge issues is the financing gap for local suppliers. What's your take on what can be done at a policy design level to better fold them in to LCPs?
Yes, thank you. You know, when we look at the policy level, that impacts, I think, mainly two things. The regulation and the accounting standard, I think. And what we like to have, you know, from the policy makers is that they come up with all those rules and regulation that is the challenges around capital, liquidity, profitability, solvency, mainly for the commercial bank. Because at the end of the day, when we look at the source of funding for most projects in Africa, and I believe the same will apply for the LCPs, is still coming from the commercial bank. Yes. So how can we have policies mainly that doesn't come with stringent kind of capital constraint, you know, on those commercial bank, all these liquidity constraint. And also what we've been trying to do was to see how we can work together with those policy makers on how to recognize even how powerful is the guarantee instrument. I take today the case of ADF, the fact that we are rated AA minus by Fitch. So we want the commercial bank to be able to leverage, you know, on that rating. And one of the solutions is to get the green light from the regulator so that they can take the full advantage of such instrument. Because again, we do believe that the challenge in the African continent is not a lack of money. We have enough money in the continent, but that money is not circulating. It's not going, you know, from one market participant to another market participant, mainly because of lack of instrument, you know, to create this type of liquidity.
Thank you so much, Jules. Minister, Ambassador. When it comes to balancing energy access for the population with energy access for energy companies operating in African countries, how do you find that balance under LCP policies? And, you know, is it made any more or less difficult when you're looking at it from a regional perspective?
Yeah, from the regional perspective, it varies from one region to another. But I think I can confidently talk about East African region because that is the region that I've interacted with most. Yeah, by and large, every region is now looking at how can they minimize costs and increase productivity, and also look at how to benefit from one another, what I would call reciprocal benefits. That's why most regions are joining together to build grids. And in this case, I would say that East Africa is now prioritizing increasing the energy access and affordability that connects from one country to another. Uganda is doing that, and right now Uganda is partnering with the Tanzania in building the gas and oil sector. And also Uganda exports export electricity or energy to neighboring countries. And in that, they also come into an understanding where they can build other infrastructures like roads, and also sharing of knowledge sharing within the same region. All this is geared towards reducing costs, building sustainability, and also creating good relationship, political will amongst themselves, so that if one region is developing, the other should, one country is developing, the other should not be left out. We are also looking at, when it comes to local content, each and every region is now trying to see that whatever they do feeds into their domestic need for development as a whole. That is something that I had already talked about. And a number of regions have developed a policy and enacted laws that really feeds into one another. There has been a lot of consultations within different governments of the same regions too, so that when it comes to energy development, energy knowledge transfer, energy sharing across borders, at least they should be speaking to one another in this case. And looking at East Africa, for instance, East Africa has come up with what we call East African Power Pool that brings all the countries of the East African zone together. And all they would be speaking about is how to maximize power generation using the mix of energy mix, and also how to reduce as much as possible the cost of operation within the country, and harmonizing regulations that joint projects that they always do together. And when we look at standard gauge railway across East Africa, so this is all what brings us into local contents.
Ambassador, we're running out of time, and I think that's really interesting what you're saying there, because of course it's not, consistency isn't just affected by geography.
Sure.
Sheikh Omar, I'm just going to come to you. Political cycles, they're also a factor. And in a context where they can sometimes move faster than energy project timelines, how do companies like yours safeguard long-term local partnerships against any short-term policy swings that they might be facing?
I think that what is key is to work really closely with the different government, and this is what we are doing. What we are doing in Uganda, for example, we are doing the same also in Angola, Nigeria, and so on. And the action of an international company like TotalEnergies is based on two pillars, roughly. It is first on what we call corporate social responsibility. That is to say, it is action implemented without any obligation by the company. And the second one is the local content, even if at the end of the day, it is the same objective and the same finality. So because we are running out of time, I will just say in synthesis that the keywords is working really closely with the government. We are all aware that we have to build skills, capacities. We have to build strong companies within the countries. For this, as we said, we need stability. We need strong regulatory framework. And we need, I do insist on that, we need patience.
Thank you so much, Sheikh Omar Diallo from TotalEnergies, Your Excellency Doreen Ruth Amul, the Ambassador to France from the Republic of Uganda, Nafi Chineri, so glad we managed to keep you on the line with us, Africa Director from Natural Resource Governance Institute, and Jules Ngankam, the Group CEO of the African Guarantee. Thank you all so much for all of the insight, breakdown work that you've done to help us better navigate the tricky ins and outs of the LCP landscape. And thank you to all of you who have joined us for this conversation. Do so again if you can. And there I leave you. Hope you can join us again the next time we come together.